A leader is the person who finds themselves in front of everybody else, taking responsibility for other people, often protecting other people. And a leader will very often be attacked in unfair ways, in cruel ways, in manipulative ways, all sorts of things. And without resilience, we'll fold or we'll stiffen. And the problem is we stiffen. If we get angry when we shouldn't get angry, what happens is we no longer can help other people. I'll give you another example. I have a friend, I used to work in the same mental health agency as him. We called him the Reverend. And so he worked in this one mental health agency. His coworker was a man I knew as James, African-American man. And there was a guy who used to frequently end up in this mental health agency because he would claim to be suicidal. And according to the laws, if he made the claim, they had to put him in. He would do this when the weather was bad. And there were shelters, but he liked the food at the mental health agency. And also because he was kind of a mean guy, he had people he could intimidate and pick on. So he had to be admitted, and then the staff had to protect other patients from him. This guy would act out. His nickname was Fast Eddie. And James and my friend, the Reverend, would have to take him down to a seclusion room. And on the way down, this man invariably would turn to James and spit in his face and say, "Hey, N-word." And my friend told me James would not twitch. He would not change his expression. He would keep a hold on this man. The two of them would continue walking him to the seclusion room. He would close the door. Then he would walk to a sink and he would begin soaping his hands very slowly, warm water, and wash his face 3 times. Then he would stand there. He would breathe 2 or 3 breaths. He would sigh. And then he would go back and take care of the other patients. Now, some people are saying, well, if somebody did that to me, I'd pop him. But not only would he lose his job, but more than that, he would have created fear in the hearts of every other patient in this facility. And they were the most vulnerable people in the city of Seattle, truly fragile, scared people. And James saw his responsibility to never act in a way that they would feel fear. His attitude was, I can wash off what's on my face. I can brush off what went into my ears. And he was a peaceful, kind, and sweet man, regardless. He was not traumatized by that. That's what I really want you to understand, because he had cultivated that resilience. To me, this is the ideal of what we're looking for. He's one of my heroes. And yet we are encouraged in society right now to do the opposite. You say something I don't like, I say, I got triggered. And that is a very problematic phrase. Now, if you say something I don't like, say, hey man, you're pushing my buttons. If I say you're pushing my buttons, well, I can push the button back and I can switch it off, can't I? Where do we find triggers? We find triggers on guns. You can't unfire a gun. So anybody who asserts I got triggered, and I know some people who say that have had terrible trauma in their life, but they have just defined themselves as helpless. They have said, once you say this, I am fired and I am helpless to change my condition. And so, I part of my work, I am a psychotherapist. I work with a lot of individuals who sometimes are suffering pretty severe stuff. And when they talk about triggered, I say, let's talk about that word. I know what it feels like, but how we describe ourselves determines what we're going to do next. And it's a funny thing. I used to only hear the word, something like the word triggered, with individuals who were aggressors in domestic violence. Because aggressors in domestic violence always say something like, I wouldn't have hit my kid if he wasn't so noisy. In other words, I got triggered. And somehow, what was a sector of people who we used to consider brutes, we use that same terminology for ourselves. And so if nothing else, I'd really encourage you to mentally, whenever you think of yourself as triggered, as soon as you can, say, no, I got my buttons pushed. Now, how do I unpush my button? Because you can't unfire a gun. So what can happen in martial arts training is you're going to be in situations in training where, for example, you might get frightened. Happens to me. Even today, it happens to me. I get angry. Somebody hurts me. Didn't mean to, maybe they did. Now, am I triggered or am I training? I have to regard, unless I'm in an abusive environment where I leave, but unless I'm in an abusive environment, everything is training, and I want to learn to roll with that.